This is the CBS Evening News with Walter Cronkite.
Good evening. This 152nd day of the hostage crisis has pointed up once again the confusion that is rampant within Iran's government. All week there were ups and downs in efforts to transfer control of the American captives from the embassy militants to the Tehran government. Throughout most of the day, it appeared that recent White House statements had met Iranian conditions and the hostage transfer would be made on Saturday. But after a 5-hour meeting tonight, this latest hope was dashed. The setback brought a stiff White House warning. Our reports begin with Tom Fenton in Tehran.
President Abul Hassan Bani Saad had said he was satisfied that the United States has met Iran's conditions, and he seemed confident going into the Revolutionary Council meeting that the Council would agree. Bani Saad said he would also need the agreement of Ayatollah Khomeini, but he saw no reason for Khomeini not to say yes. After the meeting, Bani Saad departed by another door and left Foreign Minister Sadegh Ghabzadeh to face the newsmen. It was bad news.
We have to have some more information from the precise position of the United States concerning the statement which was made by Mr. Bani Saad.
You're looking for further clarification?
Yes.
Sir, will there be a decision tonight?
No, that immediately afterward we will decide on that.
There's no decision on transfer?
No decision.
When do you expect a clarification?
Well, I hope within a couple of days.
When do you expect the hostages to be transferred?
There is no decision of the transfer immediately.
What clarification do you need? What is unclear? What is not clear?
Well, one decision was made by the Revolutionary Council. The response is not as clear as they wanted. Therefore, they have asked the foreign minister to ask for further clarification and submit it to the Council, and the decision will come immediately afterwards.
Are you waiting?
What had happened during the more than 4 hours of debate was an unexpected setback for Ghabzadeh and Bani Saad. They and the other moderate laymen on the council ran into strong opposition from members of the hardline clerical faction who were using the hostage issue as a means of attacking the moderates. The fate of the hostages has become once more entangled in Iranian politics. What seemed to be a clear-cut situation is once again cloudy and uncertain, and there is now a real danger of the plan to transfer the hostages collapsing. Tom Fenton, CBS News, Tehran.
The only official reaction to the Revolutionary Council came late this afternoon when spokesman Jody Powell said, "The American position has been clearly stated. We hope the authorities in Iran will carefully consider that position and the full implications of the situation before making a final decision." Powell refused to explain whether that means that the president has decided to make no further clarifications to Iran or not. The White House has decided to say as little as possible. As one official said, to remain cool, ride out the storm, and hold our breath. There was some indication that one reason for the brevity of the official comment was to demonstrate to Iran the administration's willingness to show restraint in this situation, which is one of the conditions set down by Bani Saad. Powell did say there have been continual communications between Washington and Tehran today, but he repeated that there is nothing in those private messages that is any different from what's being said publicly. The only other administration comment on Iran came from Mrs. Carter while she was campaigning in Pennsylvania.
He did last week tell them that if they did not take further positive steps soon, that he would take further measures against them. He reserves the right to do that if the positive steps now do not materialize.
This afternoon, the president flew off to Camp David, where he will spend the Easter weekend. His spokesman refused to say whether he has set a deadline on imposing economic sanctions against Iran. But other officials say that the president is thinking in terms of a week or less. Leslie Stahl, CBS News, the White House.
The deposed Shah of Iran's presence in Egypt, where he underwent surgery last week, has triggered a new fundamentalist challenge to President Sadat's rule. Doug Septon has that story.
Good morning.
President Sadat paid a private visit to the former Shah of Iran today, afterwards telling newsmen that the Shah's health was improving and that the Shah would stay in Egypt permanently. While at the same time in Asyut, some 240 miles up the Nile, 4,000 to 5,000 university students were staging the largest anti-Sadat rally since Camp David. The Shah was a particular target. At times, massed voices chanting that Egypt was not a haven for assassins. And although it was not advertised as an anti-Sadat gathering, every complaint voiced at the demonstration was the result of a Sadat policy. The peace treaty with Israel was condemned, Israel and Zionists being challenged for holding on to Arab land, particularly in the holy city of Jerusalem. Sadat himself came under attack, students chanting, "We don't need another pharaoh in this century," a reference to the autocratic Egyptian leaders of thousands of years ago. The criticism of Sadat, which has been confined to relatively insignificant political parties of the left, has now been taken up by the far more important fundamentalist Muslim movement. But Sadat has had problems with dissident student groups before and has managed to survive. Now he faces another test, and perhaps not so incidentally, he has scheduled a trip to Asyut to follow his upcoming talks with President Carter in Washington. Doug Sefton, CBS News, Asyut.
When America needed to cheer, the world watched the impossible dream come true. Volkswagen salutes the 1980 USA gold medal hockey team. Here in their new Volkswagen Vanagon, the greatest hockey team in the world. Get your free team photo and see the full line of Volkswagens at your local Volkswagen dealers.
During peak hours at New York's Kennedy Airport, a plane lands every couple of minutes. What keeps these landings regular as clockwork is some ground-to-air communication equipment built by the people of ITT. ITT radio equipment is used by every major U.S. airport. And somewhere, somebody is being brought home with it at this very minute.
President Carter's call for a boycott of the Moscow Olympics because of the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan is being challenged by those whose support he needs most, the Americans who would compete in the Summer Games. So the administration acted today to head off that spreading revolt, and Bernard Kalb reports.
A group representing American Olympic athletes ran into a White House rejection of a proposal for a partial boycott, participating in the games but not in the ceremonies.
Their position is basically that they decided long ago that the best way to deal with this was not to go, so that anything short of not going is not their position.
At the State Department, spokesman Harding Carter sought to project an image of confidence that the boycott decision would be sustained. But his statements reflected the anxiety within the administration about U.S. athletic backing of the boycott position.
There are a number of people who, when the request comes to them for sacrifice, are inclined to say, "Why me?" It is only natural that you would hear it, and you have been hearing it from certain sectors of organized athletics.
30 countries, according to a State Department list made public today, support the boycott. Curiously, about the same number as on a 2-week-old State Department list, though privately U.S. officials say at least 50 countries will ultimately join the boycott. But it's not that simple. Some countries, such as Britain, Canada, and Australia, which have offered varying degrees of support for a boycott, have found themselves confronted by Olympic groups that might participate in the Moscow Games. Spokesman Carter made it clear that the pressure is on for the U.S. Olympics Committee to ratify the president's boycott decision at its meetings next week, so that this decision can influence other countries to take a similar stand. This afternoon, several senior administration officials met at the State Department with representatives of various athletic groups to press for a boycott.
We're told that this is in our national interest and important to the national security that we not go. Then what person is going to say, let's go?
A CBS telephone poll of 79 members of the more than 400 members of the U.S. Olympics Committee House of Delegates showed 27 voting to send a team to Moscow, 16 opposed, 36 undecided. That seemed to be in line with one view at the State Department, that next week's voting could go either way. Bernard Kalb, CBS News, the State Department.
Leftists holding the Dominican Republic embassy in Bogota released 2 more of their captives today, leaving 25 hostages, including U.S. Ambassador Diego Asensio. The freed hostages were a Colombian protocol officer and a Dominican citizen. The Senate Budget Committee today approved a $613 billion budget with a $10 billion surplus. The committee's version is $1.5 billion higher than the budget recommended by President Carter and the House Budget Committee. But the real difference is in where the money should be spent. The Senate budget raises defense expenditures and cuts appropriations for social programs. Federal regulators today authorized a revolutionary mortgage for home buyers in which interest rates can be adjusted up or down every 3 to 5 years. The renegotiable rate mortgages, or RRMs, are designed to protect home buyers from being locked in for 30 years to today's record high interest rates and to encourage the building of new housing. The new mortgages can be issued immediately by some 2,000 federally chartered savings and loan associations. American automobile sales fell 30% in the last 10 days of March compared with the same period last year. The drop was blamed on the tighter credit policies. The stock market today was down in moderate trading.
Canon presents the world's most compact big copier, the NP200, small enough to fit on the desk.
Fast enough to make 20 letter-sized copies a minute. Big enough to copy up to 11 by 17 on virtually any paper, even transparencies. With Canon's superb copy quality.
The compact big copier with a compact price. The Canon NP200. Ingenuity makes it possible. Micronics makes it simple.
This is Jim Simpson for Valvoline Motor Oil. Here in Miami, where temperatures are soaring and traffic's heating up, where everyday drivers are proving once again that Valvoline is one motor oil that's not just for winning races. Tell me, Cale, how hot is it?
Jim, you could fry an egg on these car hoods, but one thing keeping these idling engines from cooking is a good motor oil. Valvoline's working overtime here.
Protect your engine with Valvoline. All kinds of weather, all kinds of traffic. Valvoline motor oil is not just for winning races.
A House subcommittee, not without fallout, concluded today that 3 Mile Island was a serious accident, but not a serious threat to human health. The Energy Subcommittee of the House Committee on Science and Technology called nuclear power generation the safest major industry on Earth. The report criticized much of the media for alarming what it called an ill-informed and easily frightened public. But 2 members of the panel said the report, in blaming the public, offered a classic example of blaming the victim. Rhythmic tremors shook Mount St. Helens in southwest Washington state today, and bigger plumes of steam and ash convinced scientists a lava eruption is likely. A spokesman said it's a different kind of seismic occurrence than anything we've seen in the past 2 weeks. Scientists can't tell exactly where the hot molten lava is in the volcano or when it might overflow. Concern about air quality usually centers on pollution, as in the ironic observation, if you can't see it, don't breathe it. Increased reliance on coal is a crucial part of the Carter administration energy program, but the Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee heard warnings today that a coal-burning society may be making things hot for itself. Nelson Benton reports.
The so-called greenhouse effect is created by carbon dioxide, a colorless, odorless gas. In small concentrations, it helps to sustain almost all life on Earth. The relatively small amounts of carbon dioxide in the Earth's atmosphere filter the warming rays of the sun to the Earth's surface. But like a greenhouse, carbon dioxide also prevents heat given off by the Earth from escaping into space. Researchers say increasingly large amounts of CO2 are accumulating in the atmosphere. They fear the Earth will gradually become warmer, causing as yet uncertain but possibly disruptive changes in the Earth's climate 50 to 70 years from now. Fossil fuels, when burned, release carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. Coal, the worst culprit, oil and natural gas to lesser degrees. Scientists and a few politicians are beginning to worry that global energy planning does not take the greenhouse effect seriously enough. If the Earth gets too warm, for example, ice caps could melt, raising the level of the seas.
Possible, probable, we really don't know. But if it happens, it means goodbye Miami, goodbye Corpus Christi, goodbye Sacramento, Goodbye Boston, which obviously is much more of a concern. Goodbye New Orleans, goodbye Charleston, Savannah, and Norfolk. On the positive side, it means that we could enjoy boating at the foot of the Capitol and fishing on the South Lawn.
One model of climate, the Jason climate model, predicts that doubling carbon dioxide will result in August in Washington, D.C. that are 9 degrees centigrade warmer, or 16 degrees Fahrenheit, than current summers, but that the winters will only be 2 degrees centigrade warmer. Changes of this magnitude are very probably going to have a profound effect on agriculture, on all aspects of energy use and generation, and on water and land use.
One scientist put the urgency of the greenhouse potential in biblical terms, citing the warning given to Noah in the Old Testament. Noah knew trouble was coming, he said, and he prepared for it. Nelson Benton, CBS News, Capitol Hill.
Well, it doesn't happen very often. In fact, it may never have happened before. A building stalled on the railroad tracks and the freight train hit it. It happened in Los Angeles. They were moving a 2-story apartment house, and crossing the railroad tracks, it slipped its wheels and stalled just before the freight rounded the bend. A minor train accident almost gave Boston big trouble today. A locomotive sideswiped a tank car in a freight yard at Somerville, just 3 miles from downtown Boston. The damaged car began leaking poisonous gas from phosphorus trichloride used in water treatment. Before a favorable wind dispersed the gas, 74 persons in the neighborhood were taken to hospital for treatment, and 7,000 were evacuated. Retired Supreme Court Justice Stanley Reed, a Franklin Roosevelt appointee who served 19 years, has died at the age of 95. Reed, the last justice to serve without a law degree, died yesterday at a nursing home in Huntington, New York.
I want to demonstrate a surprising fact about Tums, and I want you to participate. Start counting when I drop Tums into this stomach acid, and stop counting when you think Tums has begun to neutralize it. Ready? Go. Stop. Tums starts to neutralize excess acid instantly, and neutralizes all of this acid in less than 6 seconds. The only way that Tums could work faster is if it worked in my hand.
Aren't you ready for a change?
I'm overqualified?
I ought to do something else. It's gotta be a better way. With Century 21, you can be important to others, important to yourself. If you want the potential for unlimited growth, complete training, the most recognized name in real estate, take a step forward. Call your nearest Century 21 office and ask your broker about a personal career evaluation today. It's a lot more than just changing jobs. It could change your life. Excellent.
After 3 months of trial, a federal judge in Atlanta today dismissed the most serious banking violation charges against former Carter administration budget director Bert Lance. Robert Shackney has details.
Trial now in its 12th week, Bert Lance's legal fortunes took a very sudden and favorable turn today. The judge, in effect, threw out a major part of the indictment against him. For over 2 months, prosecutors had been amassing a huge paper case against Lance and 3 co-defendants, trying to prove with thousands of bank documents that Lance had conspired illegally to manipulate bank funds in arranging loans. But in court today, Judge Charles Moy ruled that the conspiracy part of the indictment was legally invalid. He instructed prosecutors to offer no further evidence involving conspiracy, and said he intended to instruct the jury to acquit on that one count. The evidence, Judge Moy ruled, does not support a finding of generalized conspiracy. Immediately after the judge handed down his ruling, Lance appeared before cameras.
I'm delighted about it. I think it follows with what I've said for almost 3 years now, that there absolutely was no substance to these charges about this whole affair.
No one, defense or prosecution, is willing to forecast the outcome of the case at this time. Serious charges remain before the jury. The defense has yet to present its case. But over half the indictment that was presented in court in January has now been dismissed, and that's good news for Bert Lance. Robert Shackney, CBS News, Atlanta.
Only from Cadillac. Seville for the 80s. Unique in all the world. Only from Cadillac. The front-wheel drive Eldorado. One of the world's best engineered cars. Only from Cadillac. Luxury cars with diesel availability across the entire line. All available now, only at your Cadillac dealers.
Nick, I need help.
Sure.
What should I use to clean my bathroom?
Fantastic.
But that's my kitchen cleaner. What about my bath?
Look, as fast and easy as Fantastic cleans your kitchen, it'll clean your bath.
Nick's right. Fantastic cuts right through grease, dirt, and soap scum. My whole bathroom sparkles. Nick, Fantastic is super in the bathroom.
Fantastic. What it does for your kitchen, it'll do for your bath.
Ronald Reagan appears unstoppable right now for the Republican presidential nomination. Our surveys in states where crossover voting is permitted shows him attracting significant numbers of Democratic and independent voters. They apparently like what he's been saying, but some of his detractors claim that at least some of what he's been saying is a little short on accuracy. We asked Bill Plant to look into that.
Ronald Reagan's campaign rhetoric is loaded with facts and figures, which he tosses around with the enthusiasm of a high school debater. A skilled speaker, Reagan uses these examples to help drive home his message, and audiences love it. But the accuracy of some of these crowd pleasers has already been called into question more than once. Yet Reagan persists. Here are some examples from Reagan's standard campaign speech, things he says just about the same way several times a day.
There's a third useless layer of bureaucracy up on top, HEW. And it costs HEW $3 in overhead to deliver $1 to a needy person in this country.
Reagan is wrong. It doesn't cost $3 to deliver a dollar of welfare, but 12 cents. Reagan says that he's been in the habit for years of clipping and filing bits and pieces of information. And sometimes, as with the HEW story, he says he can't remember where they came from.
If the figures that I've been given are correct, in these last 3 years, the federal government has increased by 131,000 of those.
The figures are not correct. The increase through January of this year was not 131,000 employees, but 6,000. Reagan says he got the numbers from a member of Congress, though he doesn't recall which one, and he assumed that they were correct.
Yet a General Motors has to employ 23,300 full-time employees just to comply with government-required paperwork. Now they're not building automobiles. They're filling out government forms.
GM does have 24,000 employees working on government-mandated programs, but most of them are designers or engineers, not paper pushers. The company says about 5,000 people are actually filling out reports. Reagan claims he caught this one himself.
I should not have been saying it as I did, and it disturbed me somewhat. I hadn't heard a criticism on that one, but I thought just doing paperwork sounded like an awful big office building.
To support his contention that the United States has plenty of oil and that industry should be deregulated and turned loose to find it, Reagan says,
one survey by two men, Mr. Mull and Mr. Kosoloff, of the U.S. Geological Survey in 1976, done for the Fish and Wildlife Service, says that Alaska has a potential that is greater than the known reserves of Saudi Arabia.
Charles Mull, one of the authors of that survey, says it made no estimates of Alaska's total oil potential. The other author, whose name is Kozowski, not Kozlov, adds that the report never made a comparison between the resources of Alaska and those of Saudi Arabia. Neither man was contacted by the Reagan campaign. In instance after instance, the campaign failed to go back to the original source.
Even more, a more generous estimate has been made by the natural resources agencies of Alaska itself.
That study did indeed estimate enormous potential for Alaska, but it was made 6 years ago, and Robert N. Klein, the principal author, says he no longer stands by that optimistic prediction. The U.S. Geological Survey thinks there is a good deal less than half that. Reagan thinks the USGS is too conservative. Reagan advocates an across-the-board 30% tax cut over 3 years, as proposed by Congressman Jack Kemp and Senator William Roth. He compared it in this TV commercial used in the Illinois primary campaign to the tax cut for which President Kennedy asked.
I didn't always agree with President Kennedy, but when his 30% federal tax cut became law, The economy did so well that every group in the country came out ahead. Even the government gained $54 billion in unexpected revenues. If I become president, we're going to try that again.
Was that really a 30% tax cut, which President Kennedy requested and which Congress passed in 1964 after his death?
And what Congress, when they finished, gave him was 30% at the bottom levels of the income earners and 23% at the top levels, the top brackets, and it averaged out 27%. So what I've said is that Kemp Roth is asking for exactly what, in amount, what Kennedy asked for.
The Treasury Department says President Kennedy asked for a cut of 18%, not 30%. What Congress passed was 19%, not 27%.
Up in Bellingham, Washington, HEW was threatening to take the federal funds away from the school district there because they are spanking girls and boys in unequal numbers.
That's another one of those items Reagan says he found in the papers.
Don't tell me that isn't true. I don't know. I'd be disappointed because it sounds so much like bureaucracy.
Great story or not, it isn't true, and it isn't even Bellingham. 4 years ago, the school district in Bellevue, Washington, was charged with discriminating against women in its athletic and vocational programs. One of the complainants noted that there had been far more cases of corporal punishment against boys than against girls. But punishment was hardly the issue, and HEW never threatened the cutoff of funds because of it.
Governor, generally speaking, are you satisfied that you have done a thorough enough job of checking your basic material?
Yes, I do. I've been on the mashed potato circuit for a great many years, probably a quarter of a century. And I learned very early that you should check them. I didn't at first, I guess, like any other speaker. I'd see something and I'd think, hey, that's great, and use it. And I just learned from being rebutted a couple of times that I'd better be sure of my facts.
Why doesn't he drop the inaccurate facts and figures? Staff members say, a bit ruefully, that Reagan is hard to program. Does it really matter? To some, it's a sign that Reagan isn't smart enough for the job he seeks. But to others, it's simply a matter of style. They point out that, right or wrong, all of those facts and figures help Reagan make his point, which is that in government, less is usually better. Bill Plant, CBS News, with the Reagan campaign in Lafayette, Louisiana.
And that's the way it is. Thursday, April 3rd, 1980, the 152nd day of captivity for the American hostages in Iran. This is Walter Cronkite, CBS News. Good night.
This is new, improved Jell-O chocolate pudding. They say it's even smoother than good old Jell-O chocolate pudding, so let's give it the old smoothometer test. That's right. It's so much smoother, I think our smoothometers are going crazy.
Introducing new, improved Jell-O brand chocolate pudding. It's so much smoother, you'll love it even more.
Smoother, right, gang? I think the smoothometers are stuck.
Michelin could make a bias ply tire, or a bias belted tire, or a second line radial. Michelin could, but Michelin won't, because we put you first. For years, we've made only one tire, the Michelin X Radial, and we've made it the best we know how. We think too many things in this world give up or give out too soon. So we don't make a second best tire. At Michelin, we refuse to compromise. One more way. We put you first.
This has been the CBS Evening News with Walter Cronkite.
See the most masterful performers in golf meet to determine their champions Saturday, April 12th and Sunday, April 13th. The 1980 Masters Tournament on CBS Sports.
This is CBS.
More layoffs in our area as the economic crunch hits home. Details next on Eyewitness News.
You're gonna love it. Nowhere else in Middle Tennessee can you see as much and save as much on beautiful, quality home furnishings as you can in Morris showrooms. Come see for yourself. You're gonna love it at